It is a late night for me. Can't sleep, but here I am and I'm going to get some work done. I thought maybe while I work, I would watch the whole trial that I missed today, day one of Linda Stermer's trial. She was accused 15 years ago of killing her husband. What I do know about it was there was a really bad house fire. He was basically in the room that it started and was severely burned. But at some point, she got in her vehicle and he managed to be outside and she basically ran him over. So it's going to be interesting. She already had a trial once. This is her second trial. I have it teed up. I'm going to go ahead and start it. I also do not have my chat open right now. I need to do that too. Although a lot of you will be watching this as a rewatch crew. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move it forward.
Was premeditated, that is, thought out beforehand. And the last box, last element that I need to check on this count, is that the killing was deliberate, which means the defendant considered the pros and cons of the killing and thought about and chose her actions before she did it. There must have been real and substantial reflection for long enough to give a reasonable person a chance to think twice about the intent to kill. The law does not say how much time is needed. It's for you to decide if enough time passed under the circumstances of the case. And the killing cannot be the result of a sudden impulse without thought or reflection. Those are the four elements, the four boxes. So let's go to count two. These are the three boxes for count two. First, that the defendant caused the death of Todd Stermer. That is, that Todd Stermer died as a result of the actions of the defendant. Second box, that the defendant had one of these three states of mind. She intended to kill, or she intended to do great bodily harm to Todd Stermer, or she knowingly created a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or such harm would be the likely result of her actions. That's the third box. I'm sorry, the second. Third box is that when she did the act that caused the death of Todd Stermer, the defendant was committing or attempting to commit the crime of arson. Those are your elements. Those are the boxes that I will be then working to check over the next few days. I want to give you the definition that the court will give you of arson, because I think it's important in satisfying the second count. What is an arson? These are the elements of the arson. First, that the defendant burned, damaged, or destroyed by fire or explosive a dwelling. If any part of the dwelling is burned, no matter how small, that is all that is necessary to count as a burning. The property does not have to be completely destroyed. The dwelling is not burned if it's merely blackened by smoke, but it is burned if it is charred so that any part of it is destroyed. That's the first box. Second, that at the time of the burning, damaging, or destroying, the property that was burned, damaged, or destroyed was a dwelling or any of its contents. That's the second element. Last one, that when the defendant burned, damaged, or destroyed the dwelling or any of its contents, she intended to burn, damage, or destroy the dwelling or its contents, or intentionally committed an act that created a very high risk of burning, damaging, or destroying the dwelling or its contents, and that while committing the act, the defendant knew of that risk and disregarded it. Those are all of the elements or boxes. So let's start out with what happened. January 7th, 2007, deputies Tony Evans and Gary Gruss are dispatched to the house. It's a Sunday afternoon in January at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon. They go to County Road 215 for a reported structure fire. They find the Stermer residence in a fully involved fire. This is the scene that you will see and that we expect to present to you as they're driving in from their squad car. This is what they see. When they drive up, deputies locate several people standing on the north side of the residence. For those of you that are directionally challenged like I am, that's if you're looking at the front of the house, it would be to the right of that picture. At this time, they locate Todd Stermer. He's laying in a pool of blood, approximately 20 to 25 yards from that side of that residence. Mr. Stermer this says unclothed. It's actually not 100% unclothed. His sweatpants and his underwear are pulled down to his ankles. He doesn't have a shirt on, and he's still wearing his socks. He is badly burned, and to say badly burned is an understatement. His burns cover almost all of his body. His hair is gone, his ears are deformed, his skin is slipping off his body. Due to his injuries, the people who are on scene try to move him farther from the home, just to be able to get him away from the fire and away from the house, and then they attempt to render aid. Due to the severity of Todd Stermer's injuries, he passes away shortly after people arrive due to those injuries. At this time, there are multiple people on scene, many of them who you'll hear from today. Mike Matheny, Connie Calhoun, our neighbors directly next door. Dr. Richard Musali, another neighbor, and Steve Leach, who was the fire chief at the time, all arrive within minutes and are on scene. You will hear from them what they saw and their statements. On January 7th, the day of the fire, the investigation starts. They call in, after the original deputies are there, they end up calling in the detectives. They call in Detective Gabrielle Rout, who is now retired, and Detective Tom Maziowski, who's also now retired. And they respond to the scene a little bit later in the day. The investigation starts. They start collecting all the evidence that they have on scene. They take numerous photographs, of which we expect to present to you. And they find a van still running, located in the west of the Stermer residence. So those of you who are directionally challenged, the van is running in the backyard. Tire impressions are located, and the detectives mark them with flags, the tire impressions leading to the van. There are several items of clothing that the neighbors we listed, have taken out and placed on Todd's naked, burned body. Those items are also collected by the detectives and put into evidence. You will also hear on January 7th, the day of the fire, people start trying to gather some initial statements. What happened? You're going to hear from Deputy Gary Gruss, hopefully today. He will tell you what Linda's first statement was. You will also hear from Detective Gabrielle Rout. She also talked to Linda Stermer on that day, and you will hear what she told Gabrielle Rout. As this investigation continues on the 7th and the 8th, Detective Sergeant Scott Leroy is brought to the scene. He's the fire marshal, and he's the scene. He's brought in to then inspect for the fire investigation. He arrives on the day of the fire on January 7th. He's actually there when Todd Stermer's there. He takes pictures of Todd. He takes pictures of the scene, and he's the one that seizes the sweatpants wrapped around Todd Stermer's ankles because he smells an accelerant. He also arrives on scene the next day and conducts a further investigation. He takes additional photographs, of which you will see. He examines the structure of the house and possible causes of the fire. You will hear from Dr. Markey at Sparrow Hospital, who conducted the autopsy. You will hear his cause of death is from those burns that he suffered. You will also hear on January 8th, Don Galuz, who's a Berrien County Sheriff's Department deputy, is called to the scene to do mapping and distances of the scene. So I'm going to show you, I think this will show up on all of them. This is the driveway coming into the house here. Oops. You can see the house. You can see the north side where the victim and the tire tracks are here on the north. And you can see where the van is ultimately located in the backyard. And what makes this interesting is we expect to present to you details of the terrain of this yard. For those of you who are familiar with Michigan walkout basements, this is a walkout, meaning that where the body and the tire tracks are on the north side is a slope down. Where the van is at below the grade level, and there's sliding glass doors that lead out of the basement. He will explain the distance of the tire tracks. He will explain the distance from the house of the body and go over the scene in detail for you. You will also hear that on January 9th and 10th, James Shinsky is hired by the defendant's insurance company to conduct an investigation, their own investigation into the fire. He has a background as a fire investigator. He then does recorded interviews of with Linda Stermer on January 9th and January 10th. You're going to start hearing as people start digging in to the questions, start asking more questions, start going into the things that don't make sense, the explanations that the defendant starts giving, and how the story grows and changes. It's going to start here. That's her third statement. You are going to hear, or expect to present to you, Dave Hayhurst and Ann Hunt. They are both, Dave Hayhurst is with the Michigan State Police Laboratory, and Ann Hunt used to be and is now retired. They're going to talk to you about that van that was found in the walkout level in the backyard that was driven by the defendant that day of the fire. They're going to talk about the multiple points that they examined, the evidence that was scraped from underneath the van, and how they evaluated it and where it was found, and the results that is determined to be the blood of Todd Stermer. You're also going to hear that the defendant's purse is found in Todd Stermer's van in the front passenger area of that van. You are going to hear testimony from Troy Ernst, another scientist at the Michigan State Police Laboratory. He tested the clothing that was seized from Todd Stermer that day, and he tested for accelerants. You will hear his lab reports. January 15th, James Shinsky starts conducting his own fire investigation. During this investigation, he seizes several rags from the washer in the basement of the Stermer residence. These are collected by Mr. Shinsky and sent to a private laboratory for testing. We expect to present evidence to you from Craig Belliette. He's the chemist for Baker and Herbert Laboratories. He's also now retired. Many folks have retired since 2007. And he conducted an analysis of those rags that were seized from that washer by James Shinsky.
Your Honor.
What's the date on that last slide?
Right, let's see if I can go back here.
Okay.
January 26th, Mr. Balliet. On February 27th, Steve Willison, who's an attorney for Farm Bureau Insurance, also becomes involved. So again, part of the fire insurance investigation. Defendant sits for an examination under oath at the request of her insurance company. The plot starts to thicken. The statements start to become more descriptive, change. You'll hear how everything starts changing. Blame starts being shifted. Stories, statements, explanations continue to change. Linda gives a statement again about what happened on January 7th. And at that time, she implicitly denies having an extramarital affair. October 18th, several months now after the fire, it's still in 2007, Steve Willison sits with the defendant again for a second examination under oath. Talks to her again about the events of January 7th. They go over the details. They go over what doesn't make sense, what's not adding up. More questions are asked. More digging is done. Things don't make sense. I'm asking, as the evidence is presented, to focus on her statements. You will also hear from additional witnesses. Kate Fox is going to come in near the end. She was the former friend, actually best friend, of Linda Stermer. You're going to hear the statements that Ms. Stermer made to Kate Fox. Mr. Williams, Chris Williams, is going to come in. He's going to talk to you about how he started his extramarital affair with the defendant, knew she was married, knew her from work, 6 to 8 months prior to the fire. You're also going to hear from Kathy Ilg, another friend of the defendant, and statements that she made to Kathy. You're going to hear from Kim and Ken Thompson. They were also neighbors close by, not direct neighbors, but close by. They were actually on scene that day. They will tell you what they saw, what they heard, what the defendant said immediately after the fire in those days. You'll hear from Annette Crandall. She was also on scene on January 7th. You'll hear more statements that Linda made to her. At the end of the trial, you're going to hear from Trenton Stermer, Trevor Stermer, and Corey Pierce. All three are the sons of Todd and Linda Stermer. They were teenagers at the time of this fire. Now they're grown men. They're going to come in and talk to you. They're going to explain what it was like to live in the Stermer household, what the dynamics were, what the relationships were. They're going to talk to you about what happened that morning, the night before, to give you an insight as to what occurred in the hours preceding this fire. This trial is going to be, a lot of it's going to be about the evolution of Linda Stermer's statements. As people ask more and more questions to try to get to the root of what happened, to understand, to figure out what really went on. Just in the process of asking more questions, you're going to hear statements, how they change about the home life. You're going to hear statements that actually change about what happened in the morning of the fire. You're going to hear statements change about where Linda Stermer even exited the home, the most basic details. What door did you go out? You're going to hear her statements. You're going to hear her changing statements of what she observed. What did you see? Where was the fire? What did you see? And you're also going to hear a lot of missing details that may be shown by other evidence and that we expect to show you. Particularly important are the statements about running Todd Stermer over with the van. Statements about never seeing the defendant. Statements about why. Why would you drive to the back of the house on a walkout basement? Why? You'll hear them. At the end of this trial, ladies and gentlemen, all the boxes that we painstakingly went through in the beginning of this opening statement will be checked. And I am going to ask all of you to render a guilty verdict on counts 1 and count 2. Thank you very much.
Mr. Prosecutor, give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Again, I want to thank you all for participating in this democratic process that we have in America. You are a very essential fiber to the blanket of rights that was embedded in the very doctrine that we all stand on and live with in these United States of America. And I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time, but this case is about a family. It's about an American family. It's about love. It's about dreams. An American dream most Americans have is to own a home, to own some property, to raise a family, and do the things that you love to do independently of anyone else. A family nucleus. The Stermer family was an American family. Marriage created an opportunity for them to grow together, an opportunity for them to purchase some land. On 2 occasions, this last occasion in which they purchased, and they decided to build their own home. A family castle. Mr. Todd Stermer was very talented in reference to his skill sets of putting things together. And they set out on this journey with him, Linda, and the children, that they were going to build what they wanted to build on a lot of land that they could hunt, fish, be apart from anyone else, and have fun on their property. But it wasn't a totally isolated area. It was in the township of Lawrence, where most people have the same dream and desire to have some property, some space, to have their horses or their cattle or whatever pets. And it was the same thing with the Stermer family. They had horses, had dogs, cats, and had the vision of having many other things. They maintained their property themselves with all the natural and necessary machinery that goes with maintaining a large space of property. And so as the construction began, it got to a point where they realized that we've built this enough that we can move in. Even though it's not completed totally on the inside, all the build out wasn't completed, but it was enough to satisfy the occupancy for them. And they would continue the finishing of this project. And they didn't put a lot of money in a lot of fancy things. They lived in a common way. They didn't have a bunch of fancy cars. As I stated, the most important focus was the children, the school, their property, and the things that they enjoy among themselves. And in a township where the motto is, we grow together. And even though these neighbors live far apart, they all knew each other. And so, on January the 7th, 2007, very unfortunate tragedy occurred. On that morning, Miss Stermer and Mr. Stermer are at home. He's upstairs in his favorite place, watching TV, fireplace, and Miss Stermer is doing standard household chores. She's down in the lower part of the house, and the children are gone to the movies. And I don't want to give you any misdirected assumptions, but yes, as all families, they had some problems from time to time. But as I stated yesterday, in marriages, you have good days and you have bad days. And you always pray for more good days than bad days. And even the bad days, we work them out. We try to work them out. And on this day, there was a conversation in reference to working out some family matters. And sometimes you don't want your children to be privy to some of the conversations that adults need to address as it relates to the totality of the family, including the children. Sometimes that could elevate up to separation, divorce. But these things are what should be discussed among adults, not in the presence of children. And so that was the reason why the children was gone to the movies at the suggestion of Miss Stermer, that they were going to talk about some family issues they didn't need the children to be privy to. And so that brings us back to Miss Stermer and Mr. Stermer being in the house alone. There wasn't any fighting. There had been some arguments. Nothing physical. Nobody threatening anyone. As a matter of fact, Miss Stermer had earlier that day went to one of the local convenience stores. Gasoline for the car, purchase a few items, come back home, and she's there with her husband. And of all the things that could happen, she hears a scream that she's never heard before. A very scratching scream. And she runs upstairs, and as she gets to the top of the stairs, all she can see is fire. All she can see is her husband on fire. What could it be like to run to a door and see nothing but a gulf of flames and a human body that you can't get to? All sources of communication was in that room. Her cell phone. She had no way of calling anyone. And in a state of total panic and trauma, she runs down and she gets out of the house for the sole purpose of trying to go and seek aid, help. My house, my husband is on fire. She gets outside. It's cold, had rained, had snowed. The terrain around the house was not concrete. And therefore, she jumps in the van, a 1993 Ford. This is 2007. It's not a 2005, it's not a 2006. It's a 1993 Ford. She jumps in the van, and after she gets in the van, she tries to maneuver out of the drive. And then she sees Mr. Stermer. Some kind of magical way, he had maneuvered out of the house on fire. And he was on fire. But when he got out of the house, she sees him, she gets out of the van, and she goes over to him and does everything she can do to try to help. A body, the skin from a fire is coming off. She tries to pick him up, and she can't maneuver that. And so she tries to get him in a comfort place to just stay in one place until she can get back in the van and go and try to seek some help. And as she attempts to leave, she doesn't look down on the ground in some kind of way because of the involuntary movement of his body. His body is positioned in a way in which when she attempts to drive out and back up and go forward, his body is up under the center of this van. By this time, the evidence will show that one of these very dear neighbors, several had seen the smoke in the sky, had called 911. And by the time one of the neighbors arrived, she was totally traumatized, and they said, "Where are the children?" And the evidence will show that they were finally advised the children was not in the house because everybody was concerned about who else was in the house. They could see the ball of smoke from a far distance apart. But no first responders are there for a while. Matter of fact, the very first people that are on the scene are all neighbors from the township of Lawrence. One individual was a doctor, not on duty, but he was a doctor. He arrived. You hear the evidence that there was a Mr. Matheny and his significant other, Miss Calhoun. They arrived. And because of his condition, they all was trying to figure out a way to provide some degree of comfort. And Mr. Matheny, who was a mechanic, opened his trunk and he had a lot of work clothes in his trunk. And he laid them on top of Mr. Stermer for some comfort. And the facts will show that where he was now positioned, there was a fuel furnace that was part of the heating system of the house that had been installed by the family, Mr. Stermer, as part of the building. Several individuals was concerned that this fuel furnace was going to explode. And so when the very first responder arrived, they decided to pick Mr. Stermer up and put him in a small little boat and move him far distance from the house. And all at the same time, they're continuing to call in to 911, telling them, get somebody out here quick. And so when the first responders, as far as the ambulance arrived, they did all they could do. But there's one part of this that you have to understand: the trauma that Miss Stermer was going through at this time. When they were calling 911, they're at the scene. There is a voice. And in no shape, form, or fashion that a human mind could assume that this could be a fake voice or a voice to cover something up. Can we hear the voice?
I'm going to skip ahead.
From that point on, this whole tragic event has destroyed a life. It's destroyed a family. And we will be able to show you that the destruction from this fire, that there was a duty, an obligation for several individuals to do what was necessary to determine the origin and the cause of the fire. And that there is absolutely nothing through the totality of this investigation that puts any weapon in the hands of Linda Stermer. The links were never there. From this point, the investigation started with one person is alive and one person succumbed to the fire, and therefore one person must be the cause of the fire. That one person would be the person that they can talk to And that's not the way it was supposed to be. The evidence will show that there was an accidental fire in a house, in a room that had burning candles, that had burning lamps, oil lamps, that had a fireplace, and that the location of where the fire started and how it began to grow was in the same room where Mr. Stermer was. Not where Miss Stermer was, because she was down in the lower part of the house doing laundry and chores. And they started their investigation with this rush to judgment. We are going to make something because we think. We have hunches. And what they did was, as she stated, when they arrive, one person decides that I'm just going to take the pants off of this individual that is lying here suffering and taking his last breaths. And what little he's got on, body, I'm going to take his pants off. Because I think I smell an accelerant. And the pants that got tested, their laboratory say it came back with an accelerant. Don't say where the accelerant came from. But we will show that this oil furnace that was installed by Mr. Stermer is part of their heating system in the house, and along with the fireplaces, that the oil furnace had some problems, and that from time to time the oil furnace had to be bled. And so in bleeding the oil furnace, Mr. Stermer had done that the day before, and he had used some of the towels in the house, and these towels were left down in the lower part of the house. And so accelerant in reference to the household issues and needs on the outside was a common activity of use. They're going to tell you about a gasoline can. And on this property, they probably had 6 gasoline cans. Because what do you use gasoline for if you on a farm? Every machinery you have is oil and gasoline. Petroleum, and any one of those is combustible, right? Can start a fire. Sometimes with a match, and sometimes without. But the facts will be, for sure, that the cause of the fire was not by a human act, but it was clearly because of some flaw that existed in the upper part of the house. So they take his pants. But what you will also know, that this very same day, evening, and moment after that 911 call that you heard, and when the first responders arrive, and the Van Buren County Sheriff's offices arrive, you're gonna know what happened was that they told Miss Stermer, "Can we have your clothes?" Now, evidence will show that she has laid down on top of her husband, begging and pleading, "Don't leave me." She has his blood on her clothes, hugging and embracing him. She had previously tried to pick him up. And they say, when they realized that Mr. Stermer is not going and didn't survive, so placing him in the ambulance, it was now time for the coroner's office. But they told Miss Stermer, "Can we have your clothes? Come get in the ambulance." And one of the dear friends that lives in the neighborhood, in the area, had showed up also on the scene. She says, "I'll go to the house and get some clothes for you to put on." And so they took all of her clothes in the ambulance, gave them to Van Buren County officer, and the evidence will show that after they receive her clothes and she's able to put some clothes on that's brought to her from a friend's house, that they test these clothes, her clothes. She cooperated 100%. She didn't say, "You don't have a warrant? Am I under arrest? I don't need a warrant. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to find out what happened." But you wouldn't think that you'd be the immediate one, to the point that at this point of your life and you being totally traumatized and experiencing this wretched incident that's taken everything from you, your castle, your husband, your children's father. You want my clothes, but I'm going to give you my clothes. They take those clothes. They have them chemically, forensically analyzed. And the evidence will show that when the test came back, there was zero of any scintilla of any type of accelerant. And an interesting twist about all of this now is that we're thinking that this should be investigated by law enforcement, but all of a sudden, here comes the insurance people. And the evidence will show that Miss Stermer didn't even know if their insurance was paid up on the house. There had been some financial issues. Things had gotten behind from time to time. But Mr. Stermer was in control of managing those affairs for the house. And the insurance people, they tell Ms. Stermer that no, your insurance was not paid up. But if you will go downtown and write a check to the insurance agent, we will consider your insurance back in force. And that's what she did. And then the insurance people, they started doing what they do. And many times what they do is to see how much money they can keep from paying out on a claim. And so they started this investigation of just trying to interrogate, take depositions, twist questions upside down so they could get the narrative that they wanted. And at the end of the day, they get their narrative. So they come out to the house 2 days after the fire, tell Ms. Stermer, meet us out to your property. Don't have the decency to say, come to our office. This lady is now homeless. Her children are homeless. All the belongings are gone. But the courtesy that's extended to her for the insurance is that I'm going to drive out to your property that's been burned down, and I would like for you to meet me. And she cooperates. Her mother, one of her friends, the insurance person says, we need to talk to you. They put her in their car, and that's where they conduct their interview. And then that's not enough, so they come back another day and do the same thing at the property, in the car. And Ms. Stermer has cooperated 100% with them through this whole process. Hasn't delayed, didn't do anything but whatever they asked her to do. And so that's within the first weeks, 3 weeks and months. And then all of a sudden they started providing some financial relief, temporary under the policy. And then what's more tragic about this is, as you said, this happened January the 7th of 2007. The destruction continued for almost 2 years. Before any charges were filed. They went on every degree of a witch hunt that you can imagine. Every person that knew Miss Linda Stermer, they went and talked to. It was so grotesque that they even started looking at Mr. Stermer, the deceased, as the cause, maybe, of the fire. But what they never did was a true investigation for the origin and the cause of the fire. And the evidence will show that because of the fact that they can never and did never try to make any attempt to determine the cause of the fire, they have absolutely nothing that they can put in the hands of Miss Linda Stermer as causing the arson or the fire. And therefore, there is absolutely nothing of an element that they can meet of an arson. Talk about an affair. Talk about some disgruntled friend. Talk about somebody that had a dispute with you, that don't like you. And you're going to use that and connect that to say, okay, we can go all the way back to 2 years ago and we can make this show that, yes, she committed this fire. They go as far as when they do arrest Miss Stermer, they put her in jail, and they put her in jail with other females. And shortly after she's in jail, the evidence will show they start pulling people out of the jail. You know this Stermer lady? You in the cell with her? She tell you anything about her husband? She tell you anything about what happened, why she's in jail? Yeah, she says, I'm in jail because they accused me of burning my house down and my husband died, and so they charged me with murder and arson. But every last one of these people that they spend a whole lot of time interviewing in the jail, every last one of them give them a different narrative of what they think they want to hear. And we call those people jailhouse snitches. But I leave you with this. Every last one of us is blessed to have the rights that we have in America. Accusations are accusations, but that fiber that I talked about earlier, that presumption of innocence, that beyond a reasonable doubt, those are some very, very strong threads that we get to wear every day. In this case, throughout the duration of this trial, you won't hear nothing from the defense other than the fact that there is no direct evidence, there is no circumstantial evidence. And the beauty of all of that is that the law states that you can't convict someone on conjecture. You can't convict someone on speculation. You can't convict someone because somebody didn't like the way she talked. You can't convict someone on somebody that you think that they was having some type of look or an affair or a conversation with another person under any shape, form, or fashion in America. That's not our society. That's not our foundation. Our foundation is what it's supposed to be, and you have the evidence that we're going to present in the defense of Linda Stermer. That justice shall prevail for this lady who's had to suffer through all of this since that day of January 2007. And you will bring back what is fair and what is just under the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of this state, and the laws that are so embedded in each one of our lives. Thank you.
Our morning break this morning. We'll take about a 15-minute break. Please remember the admonitions for those who have the day before. No discussing the case with each other or anybody else. Do not look at any news reports that may come your way. If something pops up on your phone, for example, delete it immediately.
Okay, let's skip forward.
Your Honor, people call Sandra Stermer to the stand, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Did you want the hearing assist?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to make sure I hear what's
Yes.
being said.
Is that good?
I think so. I'm sorry.
And then you can move the microphone. It's easier to move that than that heavy chair. So you can move that closer to your mouth so the jury can hear you.
Okay.
And we'll
I
start by
think
having you tell us your full name and spelling your last, please.
Sandra K. Stermer, Stermer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Stermer, did you know Todd Stermer?
Yes,
How did you know Todd?
he was my son.
And do you know Linda Stermer?
Yes,
And how do you know her?
she was my daughter-in-law.
And how long were Todd and Linda married?
I think 13 years.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I have you move your microphone down a little bit? There you go.
Better? Okay. I think 13 years. They were together longer than that.
Do you know how long they were together before they got married?
Well, they had 2 kids. Trace, so a couple of years, 2. Trace might have been 2 or 3 when they got married.
A couple of years, and then they were married about 13.
Yeah.
And what was your relationship with Linda like during the marriage?
It was okay.
What was your relationship like with your son?
It was great. He was a good son. I loved him.
Had you been to their house, the new house that they built on County Road 215?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm not hearing very good here. What was it?
Had you been to their house that they were building on County Road
Oh, yes.
215 many times?
Yes.
And at the time of the fire, can you describe to the jury kind of what the state of the house was, or?
It was still a work in progress, but the chimney was done, bedrooms, it was very livable. Nice kitchen.
Did it have floor coverings? Like carpet and?
I don't think there was any carpet. I think it was just wood floor, but I won't swear to that. It's been a long time.
A lot of years. So who was building the house?
Todd was, with, you know, he'd get help when he needed help, and his brother helped him quite a bit, and a lot of friends. He had a lot of friends.
Had he built things before in the past?
What now?
Had he done building or remodeling in the past?
Yes, he was very handy. Could figure out most any kind of carpenter work, plumbing, electrical. He'd worked as with an electrical contractor at one part where he was in an internship for quite a while. I was hoping maybe he'd stick with that, but he likes his independence. So.
Did he, so you said he built most of the house himself, but then contracted out other parts?
Yeah, there was parts of it that was contracted out, yes.
Do you know who was living in the home at the time of the fire?
Todd, Linda, Trevor, Trenton, and Corey.
And who are Trevor, Trenton, and Corey?
Trevor and Trenton are Linda and Todd's sons, and Corey is Linda's nephew.
And did Todd treat Corey as a nephew,
Corey,
or?
No, he treated him like a son. He was a son to him. And we figure he's my grandson. I mean, I don't normally even say anything different except Todd's 3 sons.
And had Todd and Linda raised Corey from a young age?
2. He was only like 2 when they, so.
Todd died on January 7th of 2007, right?
Yes.
And when did you see him last prior to the fire?
The Friday before.
So that was on a Sunday, so you saw him the Friday before? And what happened on that Friday?
Well, my other son had given me $100 gift card to go to Red Lobster, so I invited Todd and the boys to come in. It was going to start school the next week, and I said if they came in, I'd buy them lunch or Brad would buy us all lunch at Red Lobster. And so they did, and we had a nice lunch and good time. They were in good moods.
So you had the 3 boys and you and Todd?
Yes.
Anyone else?
Linda was working, so she wouldn't have been excluded if she'd have been.
And what was, Todd, you said everybody had a good time?
Yes, we did. He had been to a doctor earlier in the day for an ear infection. And so the boys drove in, and then he came after his appointment. And that was it. We just chatted and talked, beginning of school and whatever was going to happen.
What was Todd's mood?
Todd was in a very good mood that day.
In spite of the ear infection?
Yeah, he was. I remember him smiling and laughing and joking with the kids. So.
Any discussion about anything bad going on?
He didn't tell me anything bad going on, no.
If there would have been something bad going on, did you have the type of relationship where he would have discussed it with you?
He would have eventually, but he probably wouldn't have brought it up right then at lunch. But anyway, so he would have probably tried to talk to me in private rather than,
Instead of in front of the boys?
Yeah.
Were you aware of any problems that Todd and Linda were experiencing in their marriage?
As far as, no, nobody told me anything. That I didn't think it was turning into a very good relationship by then. Just more tension between the two of them. That Thanksgiving, he came to Thanksgiving, him and the three boys came to where we were all at family-wise, and she went with the girls someplace else. So that's holidays like that where it was getting iffy whether they'd both be coming together or not.
And traditionally, are holidays a big thing in your family?
Yes.
And usually everybody comes together?
We usually come together, yes.
Did Todd, was he a physically fit man at the time of his death?
Yes, he had very little body fat. He was in good shape. He wanted to play sports all the time, and he couldn't do anything. At that age, he was 42, that he played 110%. He was very active.
Did he get involved in any coaching?
He coached, yes, his kids, he coached a whole lot. And a lot of people in Lawrence and everything really, there's always going to be the naysayer, but most of them all liked him and the kids liked him. He loved kids and he was good with them.
Did he have any physical limitations?
No, he'd had a couple of knee surgeries from skiing and whatever sports things, but it didn't seem to slow him down much.
No. So you didn't notice that it slowed him down when he had those knee surgeries?
No. He was still out running bases and playing basketball, so.
Even after his surgeries?
Yeah, oh yeah.
When did you first hear about the fire?
Sunday night, later in the afternoon.
Later in the afternoon?
Evening, actually, it was evening.
And when you heard about it, what did you do?
After I talked to the detective, my sister was over there at my house, and we got in the car and drove out to Lawrence.
And did you actually get to go to the house?
We didn't go to the house. I drove down by the house, and then we found out that Linda and the boys were at a neighbor's house, and so we went over there.
So you went with the boys? Okay. And so did you ever go out to the scene that day?
Not that. I mean, I saw it from the road,
Okay.
but the driveway was a mess, and the fire trucks were still in there, and there was police, and I couldn't go down. I mean, I don't know what I could have seen if I'd have went down there, really.
And so then, did you have an opportunity, well, where did the boys go after the fire?
They were at this neighbor's house. I don't remember his name now, but he had come over after the fire, and then and Linda and the boys are all there by then. Ashley had come, her daughter. And
Who's Ashley?
Ashley?
Yep, who's Ashley?
Well, it looks like they had an issue on their end today. I can skip over it all.
Good morning, Ms. Stermer.
Good morning. What is? This thing is, I'm hearing noises coming from behind me here. From this, I guess. Well, maybe if I just,
Was it the noise of this moving this?
it's weird.
Are you hearing it now?
What now?
Are you hearing it now,
Yeah.
the noise?
Can you hear
No? We'll try a different headset for you.
it? Sorry. I don't know how this one goes.
under your chin. Sound okay?
We'll see. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Good morning, Ms. Stermer. Can you hear me?
Hi, good morning, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'll be brief, Ms. Stermer. You stated that your son was very skilled in building. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And he had been an apprentice. Is that I understand?
He was a apprentice for an electrician.
Okay.
Sorry, can we move your microphone down again?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Well, okay.
Right there. See the microphone? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No sound issues in here.
I'm electronically challenged.
But you apprentice for an electrician, is that right?
Yes, he was. And he also, he just was one of those guys that could look at a blueprint and he'd measure and he just was a perfectionist along those lines. He'd remodeled a couple of houses along the way and that he'd sold, and he'd learned. He was a smart kid.
Well, was this the first house that you
That he built from scratch.
that he built from scratch? Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And you were very proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was always proud of my sons anyway, or daughters, whatever. But yes, I was proud of him.
So when he told you that he was going to build this first house from scratch, did you help him financially in reference to the?
Not right at first. I mean,
Okay.
it was later on. He got when he was getting into the closing stuff, and he'd already put a lot of money into it. That
Okay.
he had that I helped him out some.
Had you ever spent the night at the new house that he built?
Did I?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, no, okay. But you knew? Did you know the geographics of the house on the inside? You did.
Yes, I'd been out there a lot.
Okay. Okay. It was upstairs.
I was probably upstairs only about once because I've had both hips replaced.
Right, okay.
Stairs are a little challenge.
Yes, I understand. But he had a fireplace. Did he ever express to you which part of the house was more passionate to him than the other?
No, not to me.
Okay. Okay. When you were speaking with Linda right after the unfortunate demise of your son, was she still hysterical to you as far as processing the whole incident?
She pretty much, when we got back to my apartment, I gave her my room, fixed her up with, whatever, and she just went in there and stayed in there, and I was out in the living room with the boys, and so.
Good. Good.
And the lunch that you and your son and your grandsons y'all had, the only reason why Linda wasn't there is because she was at work?
They said she was at work or she was doing something. I mean, she worked periodically. She worked at different jobs, and she did a lot with a lot of horses. And so I don't remember especially, but I'm thinking it was work that they thought that said they, you know.
Did you know about the horses?
The horses?
Yes.
I knew something about the horses, yes.
Big pardon?
What? I knew about the horses.
You knew about the horses. Okay. So, would it be fair to say that your son or Linda, they didn't use you as a sounding board for any family affairs, right?
No, I know Todd. I mean, I had talked to Todd at different times. We used to ride to ball games a lot. His kids were real active, and I tried to go to as much as I could. And he had trying to get my thoughts straight. Anyway, he said he found out some things, but I don't think I ought to bring them up here. I mean, about whatever, about their marriage. I mean, he found out that she hadn't told him the exact truth about a lot of things before they got married. And,
Before they got married?
yeah.
Okay.
And after they were married, a few more things popped up, whatever. But he was trying. He just told me he was going to try, and he wanted to be the best husband he could be. So he was going to stick with it, and didn't want to be a weekend dad. And that's where we pretty much left it. He didn't come and cry to me that Linda's doing this, that, or the other thing. No, that wouldn't have been him.
Okay.
He would have never. He would, if they were really getting a divorce, he would have come to me and told me eventually that, well, we're getting a divorce, and I probably would have heard over that weekend, actually, if she was really leaving. So, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Stermer.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, I just wanted to clarify. When the house that Todd built had a basement level, right?
And upper level too.
So
Loft or
a
whatever.
loft. So when
That's what I'm talking about, yes. I probably went up to the loft maybe once.
okay. So was it like a loft that overlooked the living room?
It seems like it had stairs going up. It wasn't overlooking anything.
Okay. So you hadn't gone upstairs, meaning the loft.
Right. I had been on first 2 floors, yes.
So you were on the main level, and is that where the kitchen, the living room, and everything was on the main level?
We used to, like at Christmas, we'd played cards down in the basement.
So you'd also been in the lower level,
Oh, yeah.
in the basement.
Yeah.
So really the only level you didn't go to was the loft.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just wanted to be clear. And I just wanted to touch base. The evening of the fire, you said that you sat with the boys?
Actually, what I remember is sitting on the kitchen floor with Trevor. And we just sat there almost all night.
On the kitchen floor?
Yeah.
What were you doing on the kitchen floor?
Crying and talking and just supporting each other.
And Linda was not involved in this at all?
She was in the bedroom.
I have no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any follow-up, Mr. Clark?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Jury, do you have any questions of this witness? I'll have you raise your hand. No? Okay. Is she excused from proceeding?
Your Honor, I would ask that she be excused.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Your deputy assistant is getting down that side.
I get down.
I have never seen that before, where the judge asks if the jury had any questions for the witness while they're on the stand. There's a first time for everything.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people called that we tell Tony Evans.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please have a seat, and when you're settled, and you can move the next and wait.
Yeah, a little bit easier this way. Tony Evans, EVANS.
Thank you. What is your current occupation?
I'm currently employed at the Van Buren County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been there?
Over 26 years.
In what capacity were you working with the Van Buren County Sheriff's Department on January 7th of 2007?
I was a K-9 deputy.
You were pardon me, a what?
A K-9 deputy.
K-9 deputy. K-9 meaning you have a dog.
Yes.
And were you dispatched to a fire on that day at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon?
I was.
And do you recall the location?
The 66,000 block of County Road 215.
Is that in Lawrence Township?
It is.
Van Buren County, state of Michigan?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how long it took you from the time you were dispatched till the time you got to the property?
About 7 minutes.
And were you the first emergency responder or law enforcement to arrive?
I was the first law enforcement. There was a firefighter, first responder that was there before me.
Do you recall who that was?
Steve Leach.
What did you observe when you first arrived at the home?
So when I pulled in a long dirt driveway, heading back to the west to a 2-story yellow home, I pulled in, it parked off to the right about 3/4 of the way down. I saw heavy smoke on the north side of the residence. It was going up and a little bit to the north. Then I saw flames on the south side and smoke coming out of the second story windows.
How long was that driveway approximately?
Approximately 250 yards.
Was it a flat driveway? Did it angle up?
If I remember, it had just a little incline going up to it, to the west.
You said that you saw the smoke going up. I think you used your hands in a motion to show going up. Was there any smoke coming out of the sides of the home?
I don't remember any smoke coming out of the sides. I remember coming out of the second floor. It was pretty clear, actually.
So coming down the drive, you could clearly see the sides of the houses?
Yes.
Could you clearly see the yard?
Yes.
And you said you saw fire in the second story?
There was fire on the south side of the residence that I could plainly see. There's also some smoke. There was heavy smoke on the north side of the residence.
What were the weather conditions at that time?
When I pulled in there, I don't remember it raining. It was cloudy, a little overcast. Eventually, it did start to rain, though, sometime down I'm not sure the time frame of it when it started to rain. But
Sometime after you arrived,
sometime
it
after I
started to rain?
arrived, correct.
And then did the weather change from the rain?
Went from light rain to heavy rain to snow.
And that was later on?
Yes, it was later on.
Would that have been after it was dark?
I remember it raining, so it was about 3:37, 3:46, if I remember correctly.
When you got there, correct?
When I got there. January of that time, I'm not sure exactly what time it got dark out. Obviously, it gets dark out earlier in January here in Michigan. So I think it was maybe light out when it started raining as well.
Do you have any problems going down that 250-yard driveway?
I did not.
And then how far down the driveway did you get before you parked?
About 3/4 way down, I parked off facing the north.
And why did you park before the house?
I knew that first responders would be showing up, fire department, so I pulled off that way because it looked like there was only one ingress or egress going to that residence.
And then did you walk then from your car to the residence?
I did.
Do you recall the condition of the driveway as you were walking on it?
It seemed fine to me.
And then as you approached the house, what did you see?
So I saw subjects on the north side of the residence. About 5 people on the north side of the residence. I walked up there and they were attending to Mr. Stermer.
So I want to stop you real quick with on the north side of the property. Can you give the jury an explanation of what the terrain is on the north side and how that house is situated with the terrain?
So terrain-wise, it was a grass with a slight slope going down. And then it looked like there was maybe a driveway that they used to pull around to the back of the house at some point, but that would have been dirt.
And so then did the terrain go, did it go all the way down to then the lower level?
It dipped down to the west.
And so where were the people that you saw situated in like with that terrain?
About 20, yep, there's a green fuel oil tank that was there. So they're about 20, 25 yards to the north, maybe northwest from there.
And were they on the slope down that you described?
I don't remember being on a slope down, no.
Okay. You know what I mean when I'm talking about the yard sloping down?
Yeah, we weren't on the slope, no.
Okay, so you were
on
up
the flat part.
higher?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall who was on scene there? You said there were several people when you arrived.
Mike Matheny, Connie Calhoun, Steve Leach, who was from the fire department, Dr. Masali was a neighbor, and Linda Stermer.
And what did you do then when you first arrived and saw this group of people?
I went over there, noted that Mr. Stermer was on the ground. Noted that Linda Stermer was laying on top of him or on top of him.
I want to stop you there. So she was laying on top of him?
No, she was on top of him.
And can you describe how she was on top of him?
So he was laying down, and she was, I'd say, knees to the side of him.
Straddling him?
With his head. Can I show you real quick?
Yeah, would that help if you,
Sure.
could you come down and show the jury then how she was?
So he was laying down here on the floor, and then
Can you hear it?
So he was laying
Here,
down.
she's going to get a microphone, sorry.
So he was laying down on the ground. You say this is him, and there's his head. She had her knees here, and she was down like this on top of him.
And where was his head?
right here.
So she was face to face. Were her legs straddling his body?
No,
So she was to the side of him,
the
but
side.
then face to face with him.
correct.
How close was she to him?
She was on top of him.
Thank you. Could you tell at that time if Todd Stermer was still alive?
He did have labored breathing.
And when you say labored breathing, what do you mean by that?
His breathing was shallow.
Shallow? Was he responsive?
No,
Did you hear him say anything?
no, I did not.
What did you observe about Todd Stermer and any injuries?
I know he had burns on his face, his arms. He appeared to be severely burned. His ears, you could see some cartilage on it. He did have a laceration to the back of his head that was bleeding.
And did you see blood anywhere other than the back of his head?
He also had lacerations to the back of him.
Was there any blood on the ground?
Yes.
And where was that blood?
The blood was where he was sitting, where he was laying on the ground.
Was he clothed at that time?
He was not clothed. He did have a pair of sweatpants and his socks on. I'm not sure if he had underwear on at that time, but they were wrapped around his ankles. And there was a plaid, looked like a jacket of some sort that was laying over his private area. There was also other clothes that were bunched up down by his feet.
By his feet?
Yes.
And did you ask the defendant, Linda Stermer, what had happened?
I did ask her what happened, and she didn't respond.
Did you ask her if anybody else was in the home?
I did.
Did she respond to that?
After a couple of times, she said no, or she shook her head no, and then said there may be some cats.
What was the defendant doing then when she was on the ground?
She was saying his name, Todd.
Was anyone else attending to Todd at that time?
There was the previous people I spoke of were around him. Dr. Masali was there as well. He was attempting to attend to him as well. At some point, we had to actually take Linda off of Todd and move her so we could do immediate care.
So when you say you had to take her off, what do you mean by that?
Had to hold on to her and physically tell her to get off so we could go ahead and attend to
So
Todd.
that you could do what?
Attend to Todd.
And when you say attend to, do you mean then administer aid?
Administer aid, yes.
And at that point, he still has the labored breathing?
Yes.
Did the ambulance arrive then?
An ambulance arrived at some point, yes. Well, no, I took that. It was not there at that time, no. There was no ambulance at that time.
Did you attempt to administer any aid at that time?
So we were close to the house, and the house was on fire. There's a large green fuel tank that was on the north side of the residence. So I was worried for other first responders, everybody on scene. So tried to make the decision to move Todd further away from the scene. The decision was made between, I'm not sure among all of us, was to find something to move Todd. Because I went to try to move him, and as I grabbed him, so I tried to grab him under his arms and kind of like a fireman carry and see if I could bring him back. But due to his skin slippage, I was unable to do that. I then attempted to try and grab his arms, and maybe I could pull him that way. And the skin came off of his arms and went down towards his hands.
Were you able to find something then to try to move him?
One of the persons there found like a molded sled, like a plastic sled or of some sort.
A plastic sled?
Yeah. From what I recall, it's like a molded sled. I can't even tell you what color it was. It was
Just made of
fast.
plastic?
That's my recollection. It was probably plastic.
And once you found that sled, what did you do?
So we moved Todd up, slid him into the sled, and then moved him about 100, 125 yards to the northeast, away from the fire scene.
And once you got him moved, did other people arrive?
Yes.
And who arrived?
So the fire department arrived, the ambulance arrived after a little bit there. I also got a hold of my sergeant. I relayed stuff on the radio to him about for him to respond to the scene. Also, Deputy Gary Russ from the Van Buren County Sheriff's Office arrived. When he arrived, I asked him to grab a CPR mask because after we moved him and got him up in that corner over there, he stopped breathing.
So did you attempt to administer any other aid at that point, or did they take over then with the CPR mask?
We all began doing CPR compressions. I think it was 3 or 4 of us that did it. Coloma EMS, if I remember correctly, was on the scene. They asked us to continue doing that until he was pronounced.
And so at that time he had stopped his labored breathing, but you were still continuing CPR?
Yes, and as we tried to do CPR on him, no more air would go into his mouth.
Did you observe the Ford Echoline van at any time on scene?
I did.
And when did you first notice that?
I was after tending to the medical aid of Mr. Stermer. I saw a Ford Econoline van at the south side of the resident, or I'm sorry, the west. Well, that would be the west side of the residence. So behind the residence, with the front facing south.
So, and I just for directionally challenged people like myself, the north side would be to the right of the house, correct?
So if I'm going down the driveway and I'm looking at the house, the right side is the north, the left side is the south.
So
straight ahead would be west.
Straight ahead would be west. So the Mr. Stermer and everybody were to the right on the north side when you first arrived.
Yes.
And then the van was in the rear of the home?
Yes.
And was it facing towards the victim and towards the people, or was it facing away from?
It was facing away.
Anything you observed unusual about that van in the backyard?
I was running. I could see smoke coming from the tailpipe.
How close was it to the home?
It's fairly close, maybe 5 to 7 yards.
And it was still running?
Yes.
When you talked about moving Todd, where did you move him to, now that we have a better concept of direction?
So when we moved him, if we're facing the house, coming up the driveway to the north, and then a little bit back to the east.
So kind of
coming
farther,
back at me.
coming towards the backyard.
Yep.
Were you there when the medical examiner arrived?
I was, yes.
At that point, once the medical examiner had arrived, was Todd pronounced dead at that time?
I believe so, yes.
Once he was pronounced dead, did you have an opportunity to see his injuries a little bit more thoroughly?
Yes.
And how much of his body was burnt?
I would say 70%.
And you talked about skin slippage. Where was the skin slippage?
So on his arms, down by his hands, so the skin peeled off and went down towards his hands. He also had some skin slippage up when I tried to grab him up by the shoulder area.
And you talked about the lacerations and I believe some injuries you saw on the back. Is this the time that you saw the injuries then on the back?
Yeah, I noted there was a lot of blood when we moved him. And during the time of the CPR and I'm looking at him, there's a large pool of blood when we moved him from the area where he was laying down. Brought him over there, and once we were doing our medical assessment of him, he was still bleeding from his head. And then he had some lacerations as well on his back.
Your Honor, I believe that defense counsel has stipulated to People's Exhibit number 1, which includes it would include pictures 1 through 27, so we've labeled them all 1. So it'll be 1-1, 1-2, 1-3. And I believe we have a stipulation to admit these photos. Yes, Your Honor. Yes. And permission to publish? Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to hand you the stack of photos that's been admitted as People's Exhibit number 1, just so that you can follow along as we talk about them through the judiciary.
Okay.
So this is 1-1, and I just want to point out for the record that it's evidenced by the number 1 at the bottom right corner, just for the ability to keep the record clean. Can you tell the jury what we're looking at in item 1-1?
So that appears to be where Mr. Stermer was laying originally before being moved. I also, it was marked with a flag as well.
So the flags were used for what purpose?
So the weather started getting bad, started raining, then started heavy raining, then it started to sleet, and then it started to snow. So the reason I used the flags was to mark where he was at, and I also saw some tire impressions from what appeared to be from the van going through the grass and back to the van.
And did you also mark the tire impressions?
I did, yes.
So I'm going to ask you, if you see places where you've marked tire impressions, if you could also then describe that to the jury.
On Exhibit 1.
Did you see any on Exhibit 1?
I see one other flag, but I'm not sure on this picture here.
Okay, I'll have you go to number 2 then. And can you describe to the jury what we're looking at here?
So number 2 is where Mr. Stermer was laying.
And can you tell by this picture then in relation to any tire tracks?
There are some tire tracks next to the flag there.
And would that be then towards the kind of in a diagonal from the left to the right?
Yes.
That would be the tire track? Would that be the tire track?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to have you then go to 1-3. Could you describe for the jury what we're looking at here?
So that's where Mr. Stermer was laying. The 2 flags depict the tire tracks going I'm trying to orient myself on that.
Would it help to give you the pointer?
No, I can see
Okay,
it on here.
okay.
I got it. So the 2 flags are representative of where the tire tracks were.
So I'm going to point out, so we have the orange flag and the red flag, those are the tire tracks. Can you see on the screen where I'm touching them?
Yeah, the first flag is depicting where, so the one on the left is depicting where Mr. Stermer was laying.
Okay.
The one past it, and it might be better with
On the next
the
picture?
next photographs.
Okay.
But that could be possibly where the other tire track was.
Okay, and then I want to then the darkened area immediately to the right of the flag. What is that? Can you see where I'm pointing?
That is blood.
Okay, and that's where Todd Stermer was laying?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna have you go then to the next photo. Okay. And can you describe what we're looking at here?
That's another picture of where Mr. Stermer was laying.
And then any tire track, is this the same tire track?
Yes.
I'm gonna go to the next slide, which I believe will be 5. What are we looking at here?
So I think you can see the van in the background there. And if you look at the tire tracks, the one on the left and right, that is a tire track moving back towards the van.
So were you able to follow the tracks from where you first saw them to then the van that you found?
Yes,
And is this a progression of pictures as you're approaching the van?
it is.
Okay. So I'm going to go then to photo number 6, 1-6. What are we looking at here?
The picture, pretty much the same as the other one, depicting where the tire tracks were.
And are you just walking closer to the van at this
Correct.
time? And now I'm going to go to 1-7. What are we looking at here?
Uh, 1-7 is depicting where the two flags are, where the tire tracks are going back behind the house.
And again, then also where the victim was located?
Yes.
I'm going to go to 1-8. And what are we looking at here?
It's just another photo depicting where the tire tracks are going to the back of the house.
And in this photo, we can see part of the house, is that correct?
Correct.
And so if we're looking at the house from this angle, what side of the house is that?
This is the north side.
So if I'm going down the driveway, this would be the right-hand side of the house,
Correct.
and just looking back up at it.
Yes.
I'm going to go to 1-9, and what are we looking at here?
That is a picture of the van.
And where was this again located?
On the west side of the residence,
Which
behind
is
the house.
Behind the house. I'm going to go to 1-10. What are we looking at here?
Another picture of the van.
1-11.
So that's going to be a picture facing east, taking a passenger side picture of the van.
And so this is also showing part of the house. Again, what part of the house are we looking at here?
The south side.
And that would be the back side of the
Oh,
house?
sorry, the west side. That would be the west side.
The west side, which is the back of the house?
Yes.
Would that be the lower level? Is that the walkout level?
I would assume so. I never went in it. So.
And I'm going to go to 1-12. And if you could just describe what we're looking at here.
Another picture depicting where the van was on the west side behind the house.
And the lighted up area obviously is still where the fire is occurring?
I'm not sure on that.
Okay. Do you know what the lighted area is?
I do not.
Okay. I'm going to go to 1-13. And what are we looking at here?
That's another picture of the van behind the house.
1-14. I see. Did you put a flag on this picture?
I did.
And why do you have a flag on this picture?
So when I was looking at the van, I noticed that on the brush guard, there appeared to be blood on it.
When you say the brush guard, what do you mean by the brush
So
guard?
below the chrome bumper, there was a plastic brush guard, and there appeared to be blood on it.
And that's what the flag is depicting?
Correct.
I'm going to go to 1-15. What are we looking at here?
That's another picture of the van with the flag near it, and you can kind of see a little bit of red to the right of the flag, and that is the blood that I saw.
So I'm going to go to the right of the flag,
Right on the brush guard there.
right there where I'm pointing. And I'm going to go to 1-16. What are we looking at here?
That's a picture of the driver's side of the van.
So your back would have been to the house at this
I would have been to
direction?
the house at this time, yes.
Go to 1-17. What are we looking at here?
That's the front of the van, straight on. So I'd have been facing the north. The van was facing the south. Where the flag is, to the left of it, there's a red mark, and that's what I believe to be blood on the van.
I'm going to go to 1-18. What is this?
That's another picture of the front of the van, where that previous flag was, and then what appears to be blood on the brush guard.
So just a close-up from the
Another
last picture.
close-up, yeah.
I'm going to go to 119. Is this another further
That's another
close-up?
close-up of the same.
I'm going to go to 1-20.
Another close-up of the same of what I saw.
1-21. Do you know what it is we're looking at here?
So, if you see, kind of faint, but there's some flags out there. So if you go to the top, I don't know if you can see it from there. There's like 1, 2, 3 flags that I can see.
Are they red?
They're red.
So
that would be where the tire impression would be.
Am I pointing to the first one?
That would be on this side. So it would be on the north side.
Okay, that's
And
one of the flags?
That's one of the flags. And then on the other side would have been the south side flags.
Okay, and then these 2 flags here?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to mark is where you could see the tire impressions going to the van. Again, it was pouring rain, getting hard, and freezing rain and a little bit of snow.
So at that time, you're just trying to make sure that you get the property marked?
I'm just trying to preserve it with whatever I had at the time.
I'm going to go to 1-22. And what are we looking at here?
So what I'm trying to depict there is if you look on the left, there's the flags going kind of rounded back towards the van. So on the right side, you can see the flags going back towards the van. The left side, flags going back towards the van. So trying to capture how the van went around and parked.
So you were able to then, let me ask you this way, were you able to see where the van started and where it ended?
Initially, yes.
And you were able to follow that entire path?
Yes, I followed it from, not necessarily all the way from the front, but where I could see some tire impressions, I followed that to go around to the back of the van on the north side of the house.
Do you know how much you could see prior to Mr. Stermer's body? How much of the tire tracks you could see prior?
It wasn't a heavy impression. It was just a mild impression. It's like someone drove through your grass.
Was the ground more solid there?
At the time, the ground was more solid. There may have been just a little bit. It may have rained there before. I don't know. I'm not sure if it rained there before. But there was just a little bit of mud.
And then you were able to then track it up to the point of Mr. Stermer's body.
Yes.
And then you were able to track them going to the backyard.
Yes.
Was this a fluid track? Meaning, did you see any detours off of that curve?
I did not know.
Okay. So you were able to follow it in a pretty smooth curve.
Yes.
I'm going to go then to 1-23. What are we looking at here?
Again, depicting where the tire tracks were leading to the van.
And that's donated by the red flags.
Correct.
1-24.
The same thing. I think just a little bit better angle. I think you can see a little more on this picture where the flags are going back towards the van.
And I want to ask you, are those flags going in two separate lines?
Correct.
So the flags on what would be more in the middle of the screen, those would have been...
The flags are near the tire tracks, yes.
And so, let me ask you this way. So you're marking two sets of tire tracks?
Two sets of tire tracks.
The left side, the
and
driver's
right.
side, and the passenger
Correct.
side. Okay.
And in this picture, you can see where there's looks like some medical supplies that might have been left down, some gloves or something. And it looks like right there, that was where Mr. Stermer was laying.
Okay, when you say right there,
On the left side, above that white.
above this white,
So go above that, and right there.
so right above the white,
Yes.
that's where, what is that?
It looks like that's where Mr. Stermer was laying.
And when you're talking about medical supplies, what are you talking about?
Gloves. Gloves, and maybe that was a bandage that I probably grabbed out of my car.
I'm going to go to 1-25. What are we looking at here?
It's another picture depicting the tire tracks and showing where Mr. Stermer was laying.
And again, I just want to be clear, there's two straight lines of flags, correct?
Correct.
And so the ones then on the left would be the driver's side, and the ones on the right would be the passenger side.
Yes.
I'm going to go to 1-26.
It's depicting pretty much the same thing. I think you can vaguely see the van up on the left-hand side there.
At the top of the photo?
At the top of the photo, yes.
So the van, is that the van there?
Correct.
At the top.
Yes.
I'm going to go to 1-27. And what are we looking at here?
That's another photo depicting the tire tracks.
And I believe that is the last photo. Did you take any injuries of any photos of Mr. Stermer's injuries?
I did not.
After you had taken the pictures, mapped everything out, at some point were the detectives called?
Yes, I called my sergeant at the time, George Franks. I asked him to come out, and he came out, and the decision was made to call our detective bureau in.
And who did you call?
Detective Macielski, Detective Rout, Lieutenant Stump.
And you had mentioned that the medical examiner had arrived at some point.
Yes.
Do you recall who that was?
Amy Darling.
Did the fire department arrive while you were present?
Yes.
Were you able to obtain information about that van that was in the yard still running?
Yes, by running it through the Secretary of State system.
Did you determine who owned the van?
I believe it was owned by the Stermers. I'm not sure what name it was registered into.
What was done with the van?
It was towed.
Do you know where it was taken?
I believe it was taken to Decatur Towing.
And why was it taken there?
The decision was made by the detectives to preserve the van for evidence and continue on.
Was the rain concerning at that time?
It was, yes.
At that point, did you continue on with the investigation, or did the detectives take over?
Detectives took over.
After they took over and started their investigation, did you receive any physical evidence from the Detective Bureau?
I got some clothing that was given to me by Detective Maciowski and Sergeant Franks.
And were you aware of whose clothing or what that clothing was at that time?
I was not.
And what was done with that clothing?
It was wet. Might have been some blood on it. I was asked to go take it to our crime lab at the sheriff's office and hang it up.
And why would
Dry
you
out.
dry it out? Was that the reason it was hung up?
Yes.
And you said it was bloody and wet.
When I hung it up, I noticed there was some wetness on it and some blood, yes.
And then was that in a secure area that it was hung up?
Yes.
After you moved Mr. Stermer away from the house, were you able to then show the detectives where he first was located by you?
Yes, I did.
And at that time, was everything flagged for them?
So, when I put the flags out there, but there's also other first responders on that north side. And I think one of the pictures here shows a tire track kind of going off. I believe that is to a first responder vehicle. That's not related to the tracks that I saw going to the Ford Econoline van.
And then did you inform the detectives of everything that you had seen?
I did.
And then was the scene secured for that evening?
Yes, it was.
And how was it secured?
I believe the detectives called police to secure it and waiting on the fire marshal.
And the fire marshal, did they secure it until the fire marshal arrived?
To my knowledge, yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Just have a few questions. I want to go over some of what you observed when you got to the scene. First of all, you said that you saw Linda and you showed us she was kneeling over Todd.
Correct.
She was screaming his name, wasn't she?
She was yelling Todd, yes.
She was hysterical, essentially. Right?
She was yelling his name, yes. And
Loudly?
Loudly, yes.
Out of control?
Wouldn't say out of control, but yeah, she was yelling his name, Todd, 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 over and over.
Did you help get her off of
Yes.
him? You were looking at some of the photos, and we saw the photos of the blood on the ground. You remember that?
Correct. Yes.
And comparing it to the tire tracks. Right?
Yes.
There was no blood that you observed at the scene on the tires themselves. Is that right?
I didn't observe it on the tires, no.
In fact, we saw the blood on the bumper. Remember that? The brush guard, you called it.
Yes.
And the brush guard is about, what, 10 inches off the ground?
I'm not 100% sure how far up that is, but
Roughly?
roughly.
Okay. 10 inches off the ground, and it was inside the tire, wasn't it?
Yes.
All right. You didn't see any evidence of any blood on the vehicle itself that would suggest the tire impacted Todd, fair?
Yeah, I did not know.
The Econoline van was taken to Decatur Towing, and you had nothing to do with it after that?
I had nothing to do with it, no.
The clothing that you took, did you know it was Linda Stermer's clothing?
don't recall if I was told that by Verge Franks or by Masiowski.
One way or another, you don't know.
One way or another, I don't know at this time.
But you took it to the crime lab, right?
Correct.
And you stored it personally in some area?
So the sheriff's office has a secure crime lab area. So you could go in there, you can hang up stuff, any type of evidence. They do fingerprints in there if you were trying to get lien prints off of an item. If you were a crime technician, etc.
Are you a crime technician?
In 2002, I went to a basic 35-hour class that covered basic crime scene.
Okay. In 2007, January 7, 2007, you were not a crime scene technician for the Van Buren County Sheriff's, fair?
Well, I would get called out sometimes to do fingerprints, basic stuff, castings of a tire, but any advanced crime scene technician, no.
Okay. Were you aware of the policies of the Van Buren County Sheriff's Office with respect to how evidence is stored and secured?
I'd imagine I was at that time.
You can't just tell us as you sit here today, fair?
Fair.
And you don't know, well, you didn't separately bag any of the evidence, did you?
I did not.
Right, you just kept it and stored it in the room together as you found it.
I hung it up separately, yes. I noted it in a report.
But you don't know the way you hung it up and where you stored it was in compliance with the Sheriff's Office policies and procedures, fair?
Fair.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Just briefly, Your Honor. You never had the opportunity to examine underneath the van, did you?
I did not know.
And you're trained as to how to store evidence, correct?
Yes.
And you have policies and procedures on how to store evidence.
Yes.
And that was a secured area that the evidence was put into, correct?
Correct.
And did you follow the policies and procedures at that time of how to handle evidence?
Objection form. Leading.
I did, yes.
Thank you. I
To
know.
my knowledge, I did, yes.
As an officer, do you review policy and procedures?
Yes.
And are you informed by command staff of what policy and procedures are?
Yes.
And do you follow policy and procedures as given to you?
Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
When I asked you just a second ago, were you aware of the policy of securing and storing the evidence on January 7, 2007? You told me you didn't know, right?
I did not know the actual policy procedure on that date. no, I
Okay.
didn't.
You generally you were aware of the policies, how you're supposed to do it.
Correct, yes.
But as you did those pieces of clothing, you don't know if they complied with the Sheriff's Office policy,
I
fair?
do not know at that time, yes.
Thank you.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Jurors, do you have any questions of this witness? I've got a couple hands going up, so if you have any, please bring your hand questions, we'll retrieve them.
I'm going to move it forward. All right, they actually go on their lunch break now. I'm gonna go ahead and call it. I am actually finally tired, so maybe I'll sleep for just a couple hours. We'll see. I'll be back on here in 5-ish hours, maybe less. We're watching 2 trials tomorrow, or today, I should say. So we'll have a very busy day. All right, if you're watching, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.